Okay guys, so Gavin Allinson and Nick Norwitz, we're in the labs here at Oxford University, and ketones are talked about as the fourth macronutrient. Now, one of the things that I often hear mentioned about, and I think could do with a little bit of explanation, is how they act as a signaling molecule. Mm-hmm. So what does signaling actually mean?
Yeah.
And what is it the ketones are actually doing?
Yeah, no, I love this question because I think the term fourth macronutrient is pretty sexy. I think that's why it's been coined. Yeah. It's like, wow, there's like fourth? You look at the nutrition label, it's only 3. What's going on? Yeah. But the funny thing is, while it's sticky and grabby, good clickbait, it actually really undersells what ketones are. Mm-hmm. They kind of have two faces. One, they're a fuel or a metabolite, and this means they're broken down for energy. They go through these pathways where they're just completely combusted into like carbon dioxide that you breathe out, and then you get energy from them. But in addition, they're signaling molecules, and what signaling is being distinct from being a metabolite or a fuel is you're not necessarily being broken down, but you're binding to receptors. Okay. And then those receptors are doing stuff. And the receptors are all over. So ketones, they have receptors on cell surfaces called G protein coupled receptors that they bind to, and then there's a cascade of events that happens in the cell, and proteins change activity, X, Y, Z. But ketones also get into the cell, and then there bind other proteins that can change the way DNA is expressed.
Okay.
Which is really cool. And some really new research is showing that, believe it or not, I found this very exciting, that ketones actually can bind directly to the proteins around which DNA is wrapped. And in this way change the superstructure of DNA.
Right.
And
so why is that interesting or sexy then?
Because it changes gene expression like directly. These molecules are changing proteins, but they're also they're going into the nucleus of the cell and binding. It's like if you imagine your genome as your DNA as a library. Yeah. They're like someone going in and deciding what book am I going to open and read.
Right.
What information are we going to get out?
So when you're saying that, it's actually going in there and it's going to do good stuff. Yeah, it's going to do stuff. It's going to have an effect on how the body is run. When you say genes express, so that's turning things on and off?
Yeah, generally, turning things on and off. They're generally on signalers, at least with respect to how they bind DNA. Mm-hmm. And when they do the pathway analyses of they look at all these different genes that are expressed, what things might they be affecting? They affect everything. Your circadian rhythm, how you sleep. Okay. The top 4 hits for diseases were cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinsons, and Huntingdon, but also like diabetes and stuff. So their signaling effects for human health are remarkable.
So one of the main ones that I think they've had research on is on some of the inflammation pathways. Is that right? Because obviously most of the diseases that we have in the 21st century are diseases born of inflammation.
Yeah, no, inflammation is really critical, and one of the things ketone does, you might have heard of the NRLP3 Inflammasone. So this is kind of, if you imagine your immune system, and inflammation is kind of like an army. Okay. You need your immune system to defend you against foreign invaders, but you go to war and there can be collateral damage, and in the environments we live in, typically we have too much stress and your body gets confused and you just have this ongoing chronic inflammation rather than that kind of acute defense response. And part of this is, you can think of the general of the army as the NRLP3 Inflammasone. And ketones can inhibit it by preventing it from accumulating. And so it's a complex of proteins and it comes together. And so it can prevent it from coming together and therefore decrease this chronic inflammation. I want to add a little bit of nuance here. Okay. I hope I'm not getting too complicated. But so there was some debate over. So there's a study showing that you reduce inflammation with ketones by inhibiting the NRLP3 inflammasome. But then there was this other study that contradicted it and showed ketones increase inflammation.
Okay.
And so there's been some confusion over that. But what that study actually showed was not that giving ketones just increased baseline inflammation, but that it increased the inflammatory response when toxins were introduced.
That's right. So they gave somebody an infection.
Well, it was in an animal model.
But they gave the animal an infection, and there was, and with ketones, there was more of a response.
Yeah, which is what you want.
You want a response.
Which is exactly what you want. So I think that nuance gets a little bit lost because, for a couple of reasons. One being, it's like people think, oh, your ketones are decreasing your immune system. Isn't that also bad?
Yeah.
And what these different studies show is not that they're not contradictory results at all. They're showing that ketones make the immune system and inflammation work better. So you don't have this chronic inflammation that's causing damage. But you have a robust, even more robust, probably immune response to invaders, which is absolutely what you want.
Yeah, you want that acute response.
So, that's just one aspect of the signaling nature of ketones, and they do all sorts of other things. It's really a universe of signaling.
So you got on here apoptosis. You got a little sheet.
This is from a review we wrote. I study neurodegenerative disease and Parkinson's disease, and one of the issues with these diseases is that there are no cures. Alzheimer's disease is one of the leading causes of death, and the only disease that's the top 10 killers that has no effective treatment whatsoever.
Really? No effective treatment. And
drugs have failed 99.7% of the time. Major companies like Pfizer are pulling out. They've just waved the flag and
giving
give
up.
up.
Right.
We've sunk too much money in this, and it's the same with
things. This is ridiculous when it's such a. It's going to bankrupt America.
It will, in of itself, will bankrupt America, and by 2050, the costs will have quadrupled to $1.1 trillion. Our healthcare system can't handle it.
Right.
The prevalence will go up threefold. It's really a travesty.
They'll be having to put people down.
Yeah, and
I
don't even want to get there.
No,
but
exactly.
And then other diseases like Parkinson's, where there's actually somewhat effective treatment. Parkinson's is a neurodegenerative disease, second to Alzheimer's, where dopamine is depleted in the brain.
Yeah.
And you can treat the symptoms by giving dopamine directly.
Yeah.
But that doesn't actually treat the disease. Mm-hmm. It's a symptomatic bandage.
Yeah.
And so what's occurring to cause the disease? Inflammation. Apoptosis, which is cell death. Oxidative stress. Energetic abnormalities, and none of the treatments affect these pillars,
right?
Which also feed off of each other. So even if you can kind of like try to bandage one, the others will just reinforce it. What's really cool about ketones is because they're a fuel, they're a better fuel, cleaner fuel, and a signaling molecule. They, in theory, and we've published papers on this theory, and now I'm trying to investigate it in clinical studies. That's why I'm here. They, in theory, can address all these pathologies, and so kill these feedback loops and kind of not only address the symptoms, but address the underlying disease, so that these neurodegenerative diseases and these chronic progressive diseases are slowed, maybe even stopped, and really importantly, prevented.
Well, so if that's the case, then so that's not going to be the burden of care, and that longer term, care that people can have to be in a home or something being looked after. And they can stay at home until something else gets them, I suppose.
Yeah, that's really what we want. I mean, there are some studies on the ketogenic diet and longevity, and it might improve, the length that you live. But I'd rather, be super healthy and then drop dead at 90 than live pretty healthy until 50 and then spend 50 years in chronic disease. And that's kind of where we're headed. At least in America, more than half of people are insulin resistant. They don't even know it. And I think my generation is on track to have 1/3 diabetes rate, like actual diabetes, not pre-diabetes, bona fide diabetes. And you mentioned Alzheimer's rates are skyrocketing. Parkinson's is actually moving up faster.
Is it?
It is. It's increasing at a higher rate.
Cool.
And
well, the thing is, it's good that this research is being done, and we're at the forefront of this movement really to bring awareness to this and out in the wider community. So there are different options.
I don't mean to be a fearmonger at all. I think it's extremely hopeful because now we're really looking at we figured out infectious diseases for the most part. Now we're really looking at chronic diseases, and we know we have to take a different approach, something more I don't really love the word holistic, but holistic. And you have to incorporate more than just drugs, and you have to have lifestyle components. And I think the ketogenic lifestyle is such a potent tool. and something for people to consider. It's also so low risk.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
well, even would people have to, I know you're a fan of keto because you've got some. You want to do keto because of some of the genes that you've potentially got. But even if people just really reduce their carbs, even if they don't go down to keto level and they're more carb appropriate, that's going to be a benefit as well.
That's going to be a huge benefit. It's all on a spectrum. You have to make your own life choices, and it's like I'm basically living by myself as a university student. It's easy for me to do keto, which isn't necessarily it's still a socially acceptable thing. However, and I've heard some of the keto proponents talk about this who are parents. And their kid comes to them with a grilled cheese, or wants to have ice cream at night, and they're not going to be like, "I'm intermittent fasting, and I'm not going to eat your grilled cheese." It's like, I'll make the same choice.
I put my hand up.
I'm like, I'd rather take a little health hit and enjoy my family as well. And so you have to make the appropriate choice for your time in your life, but it's not all or nothing. And there's some super exciting studies showing that even just it's intermediate, low carb. You're not necessarily getting the benefits of ketones, but you're reducing your insulin. You're improving your insulin sensitivity.
So even if you weren't going all the way into full-on ketogenic, this is where the exogenous ketones come in that you're making here in Oxford and are available elsewhere as well.
I think the research is still a little bit out on mixing moderate carbs because then your glucose is a little bit high with additional ketones. So I don't want to necessarily advocate for that approach, but keto is still considered fringe. I think the research is really backing it, but the one thing everybody agrees on, even though nutrition is generally a pretty contentious and religious field, is that the best thing you can do, and everybody believes this, is just avoid processed foods. Avoid processed and high glycemic index foods. And so, if you're not doing keto,
just
get rid of the grains. Are also pretty bad. But fruits and veggies, if you prefer that, I can't. I don't eat say butternut squash because it's a little bit high carb. But if you're not doing keto, butternut squash is way better than like
rice or pasta or whatever.
So if you're not all going for keto, maybe you just look up Google like the glycemic indices of foods. That's going to keep you fuller longer. It's going to keep your blood sugar a little more stable, and that's really what you want. You don't want the standard advice now is to eat a lot of little meals, and what happens then is you keep on spiking your insulin. And we talked about this at the conference the other day. Is that what happens when you keep on spiking your insulin? Is your body like habituates to it, and habituation is when you stop ignoring a stimulus. So we can hear the air conditioning's on. You probably forgot about that. When it went on, you heard it. But then you ignore the stimulus, and the same thing happens with insulin. When you keep spiking it by eating lots of little meals that have a little bit of sugar in them, then your body stops listening to insulin, and that can cause diabetes, and that can also cause diabetes of the brain specifically, which is called Alzheimer's.
Cool.
So anyway,
brilliant. It's always fascinating chatting with you, Nick, and
a lot of fun. This is all just the tip of the iceberg.